Okay. The Snow White trailer. I have a lot of thoughts. Many aspects I'm surprised by, and others I was expecting. Should I start with the negative or the positive? I should end on a positive note, so I'll go with the negative first. Actually, I'll start with the neutral. A neutral, positive leaning takeaway I immediately got from this trailer is that it looks quite traditional and faithful to the original animated movie, at least more so than I was expecting. And I truly don't believe that will be the case within the actual film. From what I'm hearing, it's quite revisionist, even if it does keep a bunch of the elements from the animated movie. Disney is most likely marketing it this way due to the extreme backlash and horrible press that has been surrounding the film, which mostly revolves around pieces of information we've gotten that imply extreme changes to the story, unnecessary changes that seem to be missing the point, approaching everything from a girl boss lens, turning Snow White into someone she's not, etc., etc. So yeah, I think Disney wants to turn down the heat and present this as a straightforward adaptation of the animated film when it most likely will be quite different. I have a feeling it's a Mulan type of situation, in the sense that the first teaser trailer for Mulan looked rather straightforward and stripped down, and even though the public was outraged by the prior knowledge that there would be no Mushu or musical sequences, by the looks of the trailer, Disney seemed to be faithfully telling the story from a very grounded, dramatic place, and even found a way to incorporate the iconic songs through dialogue and instrumental cues. So the trailer really gave off the best impression it could, given the circumstances. But of course, it turns out the actual film was not really like that. It was not grounded or straightforward at all. It was ridiculous and stupid, and made radical changes to the story and character that had no purpose, and missed the point, and made the title unrecognizable. And changes obviously aren't inherently bad, and I encourage these Disney live-action adaptations to find exciting, interesting new elements within the stories they're adapting. It's all about the execution and reasoning behind the changes. How well can you justify the changes? Are they being approached in a compelling way? Are they not taking anything substantial away? Are they not cheating the audience from what they're seated for? Are they actually enhancing the experience? So yeah, I'm expecting Snow White to be a lot less traditional than what the trailer implies, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Though from what I've heard, I'm assuming the changes are not good. However, Greta Gerwig wrote the script, so I'm cautiously optimistic that there's maybe some sort of brilliant meta perspective on the story, but I don't know. Speaking of Greta Gerwig, I'm surprised that Disney isn't capitalizing on her involvement. With the insane success of her film Barbie, which wouldn't have been the success it was if it weren't for her unique creative approach, you'd think Disney would milk the shit out of that. I would if I were them. With all the bad press that this film is getting, I'm sure flashing Greta Gerwig's name in the trailer would have silenced at least a few hecklers. Anyway, that's just my neutral takeaway. Let's talk about the objective negatives of the trailer. I'll start with the most glaring, debilitating issue that will 100% be detrimental to this film if it's not drastically improved. That is the visual effects on the dwarfs. Oh my god, they are so much worse than I thought they would be. They look absolutely awful. And it's not even a design issue. The design of these characters I'm actually into, because they look jolly and bright-eyed and not like creepy old hobbit men, and clearly are meant to be the more mythical gnome-like fantasy dwarfs rather than actual human little people, which is a good choice. But the execution of those designs, by way of terrible CGI, is a massive problem that will negatively impact this movie. They look straight from a Robert Zemeckis animated movie. like Polar Express or some shit. It's bad. And I don't know if they did motion capture performances for these characters, but it's clear they're CGI from head to toe, clothing and all, and that's just such a baffling choice. I mean, visual effects are rarely as impressive these days as they were in the days of Davy Jones, so I don't ever expect to be gobsmacked by CGI in a new film, but it's usually forgivable when it's a creature design or something otherworldly that we're not used to seeing in our everyday lives. And though these dwarfs aren't necessarily human, they're still completely composed of humanistic features that are simply exaggerated. And when trying to replicate human beings entirely with CGI, well, good luck, Charlie. It never works. Human flesh, human eyes, human teeth, human muscle movements all together will always look uncanny valley when created with CG. So, this was never a good idea to begin with. Why couldn't they have just hired real little people actors, had them in costume, and simply adjusted and exaggerated their features in post-production to get the desired look? You can make their eyes bigger, their noses bigger, their bodies smaller, etc., all while having the basis of an actual human rather than creating something from the ground up on a computer. It'd be way easier to just digitally alter real people. It'd be way easier, way less expensive, and would look substantially better. Or they could have utilized prosthetics and whatnot. They just went a very dumb route. And while creating humanistic characters with CGI never looks completely right, even so, the execution with these CG dwarfs is weak. It's very animation student playing around with Blender for the first time. So there is room for improvement, and by God do they need to improve. I hope they do, but I'm honestly not optimistic it'll get much better than this. Whenever a trailer comes out and it has bad CGI, people will say, oh, they're still working on it, it'll look good when the movie comes out. Babe, this isn't my first rodeo. Most of the time, the visual effects in a trailer are pretty close to what the final product looks like. Even if the visual effects do improve, it's almost never to a meaningful degree. The footage used for trailers is usually the footage that is the closest to completion, and what the studio feels is ready enough to be seen. They don't release footage that is more than a couple tweaks away from the final look. That's just the case. I doubt the CGI is going to get much better than this, especially because they pushed this film back a whole year, so they had much more time than expected to work on it. The only way I can see the CG on the dwarfs substantially improving is if the public conversation around it consumes everything else to the point where Disney gets scared, but I doubt that'll happen. And yeah, aside from the dwarfs, there is a lot of obvious CGI in this trailer, but I don't think most of it is really problematic. It's definitely passable, and even kind of lends itself to the fantasy. Though I would have preferred something less digital looking, it does look very fairy tale-like and otherworldly in a way that you couldn't really capture in a natural, organic setting. Like, they're creating the exact image they want with the exact scale they want, the exact amount of animals they want, as much lavishness as they want, and it's giving fantasy. It works. So, yeah, the dwarfs are the only problem CGI-wise for me. So the second biggest issue with the trailer that I knew was going to be an issue, but still don't know to what extent it will be in the actual movie, it's Gal Gadot as the evil queen. She is an awful actress, and I knew that there's no way in hell she'd be able to turn in a good performance. A passable one? Maybe, but a good one? Absolutely not. I can confidently say that won't happen.
Max Lord, you're putting yourself and everyone else in grave danger. I need you to give me the stone. What happened to it? Kal-El, no!
Kal-El, no!
champagne to fill the Nile.
We don't see much of her performance in the trailer, and visually she looks good. The costumes especially are pretty great, but she's got nothing else going on. She delivers one line in the trailer, and it's the most iconic line from the original film and the original story, Magic Mirror on the Wall, who is the fairest one of all. Her delivery is so horrible and forced, and she just does not have the gravitas. She does not possess the ability to embody the quietly sinister, intimidating quality of the evil queen. And even though, ironically, she's not a good person in real life, I know she's gonna sloppily lean into a caricature of a villain like someone would in a local play, and I know those scenes are not gonna hold the weight that they should. Lady Gaga should have had this role. Even Lena Headey, Jessica Chastain, Rachel Weisz, Rebecca Ferguson, Elizabeth Debicki, Natalie Portman, and I'm sure a lot of others I can't think of at the moment would add significantly more power to this role. Also, side note, thin pencil-drawn eyebrows would add significantly more power to this role. They'd be more striking and would also be an ode to the era the original Snow White was released in, which costume designer Sandy Powell apparently was inspired by the 1930s. I would have liked to see a bit more of that in the makeup and styling of both the Evil Queen and Snow White. I like that Snow White has a bob, but I don't like how it's executed, and her makeup is also not the greatest, which I guess is a good transition to my next negative point. It has been one of my main issues ever since the first photos of Rachel Zegler in costume were leaked, and that is the dress. I legit thought it was a joke when I saw the set photos because it looked so cheap. It was giving Spirit Halloween. It did not seem like something the great Sandy Powell would ever design, and yeah, within context, I still don't like it. Especially the gaudy yellow skirt that should be either a soft pastel yellow or preferably gold. It does translate a lot better on screen than I expected it to, but still, they could have done something much more appealing and cinematic. They could have leaned into cottagecore or fairycore or mixed medieval German fashion with 1930s old Hollywood influences. They could have gone more elegant, more fantastical, more whimsical, more ethereal, more something. This is just weak. I do like her peasant dress though, and there's some interesting stuff going on there, but yeah. My next negative point is more subjective than my previous ones because it's just a vibe I'm picking up, and others seem to be as well, and that vibe can be attributed to many different things. The trailer has an essence that is kind of registering as AI, like if you told AI to make a live-action remake of Snow White, this is seemingly what it would come up with. Just an observation that I can't really fully get into at this point, so I'll just clock it for now, and if the actual movie ends up feeling this way, I can deconstruct that, I suppose, but whatever. The vibes of this trailer have me conflicted, because it's sitting somewhere between the storybook fantasy of the live-action Cinderella and the uncanny wonkiness of the live-action Pinocchio, and it could fall on either side. It could come out magical and charming, or tawdry and crass. I'm highly doubting it'll feel as sophisticated as Cinderella, but I'm not expecting it to be as lowbrow as Pinocchio either. The original animated Snow White is such a monumental piece of film history that I do think the ideal live-action companion to it should be quite prestigious, rich, and elevated while keeping all the fairy tale glory intact. This doesn't seem to be the case exactly, but I guess this leads me to my positives. Digital photography and iffy CGI aside, the film visually looks much stronger than expected. Like, The art direction isn't flawless in execution, but it's definitely the strongest for a Disney live action since Beauty and the Beast. A very flawed film, but one that was certainly visually enchanting. Like, I might just be used to the unfortunate default of these films being visually lifeless. Little Mermaid had no reason being as lackluster as it was. Peter Pan and Wendy was dull beyond belief. Even Aladdin looked cheap as hell. Don't get me started on The Lion King. Snow White is actually embracing the fantasy. People go to these movies to see these magical fairy tales come to life in a glorious way, and they're backed by such massive budgets. It's baffling how most of them don't go all out and present a truly magnificent world. So I'm delighted to see that Snow White is being presented with actual decoration. There's ornamentation in its art direction, and it's well executed as well. It's evoking a charming storybook fairy tale in cinematic form. The first frame of the trailer immediately brings to mind a Thomas Kincaid painting, which is exactly what I've always said the blueprint for the visuals of these live-action films should be. The design of the dwarf's cottage is cozy, ornate perfection. And thank God the color grading of the film is actually warm and vibrant, and the lighting isn't flat. I've been in the trenches with these live actions for too long. Though upon first impression, I'm not a fan of how the coloring of the palace sequences seems to be cold and oppressive. I mean, it's not like it's a brilliant, groundbreaking idea to have the kingdom with an evil ruler be dreary and whatnot. And the palace sequences in the animated film are some of the most sumptuous, sweepingly gorgeous of the whole film, with the doves and the cherry blossoms lending to a romantic atmosphere. Beautiful. But I still need to see this cooler, dreary color grading for the palace sequences in context. And thankfully the imagery manages to convey the coldness without being lifeless or dull. Okay, so finally there's Rachel Zegler as Snow White. And as someone who has been familiar with her work, I have never had any reason to worry about her performance. I'm pretty confident she'll deliver, and I like what I'm seeing so far. What I was a tad bit concerned about is, based on the direction the story was seeming to go with Snow White wanting to be a ruler and lead the kingdom and whatnot, I was worried that Rachel Zegler would be given the direction to approach the character with a tougher, more sturdy attitude, but between this trailer and the leaked footage of the Whistle While You Work sequence, it looks like she's maintaining the gentle, kind, princessy demeanor, so I'm happy about that. Though I do hope there are more soprano moments for her vocally in the film. Speaking of Whistle While You Work, that's the main song used for the trailer, which is such an odd choice when you think about it. There are much more iconic songs from the original film, but that's the thing. To my knowledge, I don't think most of the songs from the original film are in the movie, which is insane. Even if songs like Someday My Prince Will Come and I'm Wishing don't align with the way they're approaching the story, there are still ways to implement them. Change the context, or give Snow White a moment of weakness where she feels so overwhelmed and hopeless that she wishes she can just give up and have a prince save her just for a moment. Or have young Snow White sing the songs and her ambitions change over time. I don't know. Get creative. They figured out how to implement Whistle While You Work in a different context, so yeah. Okay, let's see. Any other thoughts? Oh, the forest sequence reminds me of the red shoes, which I like. And Snow White has red shoes that look like the shoes from the red shoes. And I love that the forest sequence is actually well lit, and I can see what is happening, and it's visually interesting. But I don't think I have any other thoughts for you at the moment. I hope the film turns out good. Most everything looks promising in the trailer, minus the CGI dwarfs. Gal Gadot's presence, and Snow White's dress. Story-wise, I'm very interested and concerned, and I hope they made some smart choices, and I hope that Greta Gerwig's pin won't let me down for the first time with this film. I just want every film to be good, and especially one that's supposed to be a companion piece to one of the most influential, groundbreaking films of all time, and one that is one of my favorites as well. Yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Love you, bye.